and welcome to Discovery's Chat with Changemakers. I'm your new host, Kavya, and I'm 11th grader in New Jersey. And I'm also a member of SWE Next, which is the Society of Women Engineers leadership program for high school girls. And I'm really excited to host Discover E's fourth season of Chats with Changemakers. Each month, we welcome a different guest from the STEM community. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of today's session, where we will introduce a hands-on engineering challenge that you can try at school or at home. Today, I am chatting with Emily Rose. Emily is a mining geotechnical engineer and a member of SME, which is the Society for Mining, Metallurgy and Exploration. Emily, welcome. We are so excited for you to join us today.
Thank you so much, Kavya. I'm so happy to be here. Like Kavya said, my name is Emily Rose. My pronouns are she, her. I have a bachelor's degree in geological engineering from the University of Mississippi and a master's degree in mining engineering from Montana Tech. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Emily a few questions so that we can know a little bit more about her. And you can also ask questions by typing your questions in the Q&A box below, and we will save some time in the end to answer all of them. Also, be sure to stay tuned once again, because we're going to have an engineering challenge that you can try at the end. So Emily, let's begin. I understand that you work at Bar Engineering, and can you tell us a little bit more about the company and your role there as a mining geotechnical engineer?
Absolutely. So a little bit about BAR. It's an environmental and engineering consulting firm, and it focuses on projects in the public and private sector, in mining, manufacturing, fuels, power, all different types of industries. It's been around since 1966. We started an office back in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and have since branched out across the country and in Canada. I currently work in our Salt Lake City, Utah office, and this office has been here for about 6 years. So my role at BAR, I serve as a technical expert on projects and also a project manager for other types of projects, depending on the team, the dynamic, the size, scope. So I get to do a little bit of everything there. And then I also hold an internal role to BAR for our mining engineering practice groups. I'm the coordinator of that group, which means that internally I'm helping our core mining team make sure that they have the resources that they need, the software, the programs, helping line up like technical training if they need something like that. And just making sure that folks internal to BAR know what skills and services we have to make sure we best serve our clients.
That's awesome. So what do you love the most about what you're currently doing?
I love that my job is dynamic. Since I get to serve as a technical expert and a project manager, I'm doing a variety of different things, but I'm pretty fortunate that the projects that I work on are kind of in that key subject area that I'm really passionate about, which is like large scale slope stability. So I get to use that same knowledge and apply it to a bunch of different project sites across the Western United States.
Wow. And I'm sure that even as you're enjoying your work, you do encounter some challenges here and there. So how do you overcome those challenges that you will face in your job?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to distinguish, like, a challenge can definitely mean something completely different based on like the size, scope, or complexity of a project. I'm personally a very visual thinker, so I always like to be able to see, the tasks that are coming up, items, deadlines, any potential concerns that are happening for a project that I'm working on. And when I'm working, I always like to make a list of all of these items just so I can see what's happening. And it's never a matter of if, it's always a matter of when that challenge comes up. The most important thing is making sure that you're communicating with your project team to help start searching for a solution. So it can be something really small, like just having to shift a meeting for a client because something else came up and they can't make that time. Or it could be something really big, like your budget has to completely change because your project scope is changing because something came up and it just wasn't there at the beginning. So it's just really important to recognize that no matter what that challenge is, you're consistently communicating with your team to make sure that you stay on track.
Yeah, and I think I really like how you said it's so important to keep communicating because that's the best way to adapt. So now we just want to get into some more details about your job. So since a high wall can sometimes be dangerous to daily mining operations, I was just wondering, what are some of the factors that you take into consideration when analyzing the risks that those high walls pose?
Certainly. So we take a look at the geology, so how those structures were formed, and then also the material properties of those structures and the geology, the geometry of the high wall itself, and how long is that wall supposed to stand for? Is it a permanent wall that'll be there for the duration of mining, or is it a temporary wall that only has to last for 6 months to a year to be able to complete an ore dive or get a certain zone out for the end of the year planning? All of these different types of factors play a role in determining your factor of safety for your slope.
That's awesome. And so during your work, you probably use a wide variety of technology, and one of that technology is drones. So how do you think that drones will change the future of geotechnical engineering?
That's a great question. I think that drones, we already use them pretty extensively in the mining industry for a variety of different projects. And they allow you to get imagery and topography much, much safer than traditional methods, that started years ago. In geotech, we use a combination of drones and laser scanners, radars, and satellites to collect different types of movement data. All of these pieces of technology collect data in different ways, and it's different types of data. So when you start collecting from multiple sources, you're able to create a full picture of what's going on in your stability conditions, and even able to predict if something is going to come up and make sure we keep people safe.
And now we're just going to take a step back, and we would love to hear more about what sparked your interest in mining. And this is actually the first audience question, and it's from Mr. Walsh's class.
That's a great question. So what sparked my interest in mining was when I was a senior in college. I took a field trip to the Ray Mine in Arizona as part of a conference I was attending as a student member. And once I got to site, I was completely awestruck by the size and scale of everything. I'm originally from down south. I'm from outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and I didn't know anything about the mining industry at all. And I got there, and the shovels were huge, the dozers were huge, the trucks were huge. I mean, some of these truck tires, like a Caterpillar 793D, they have tires that are 12 feet in diameter. They're 12 feet tall. So I was sitting there watching these trucks drive around and was just absolutely hooked. I had no idea how to get into the mining industry or even, what that meant. But I was so excited. I was like, I have to figure this out. And so I started looking at master's degree programs, because again, I had no idea. I was like, if I want to get into mining, I have to get a master's degree in it, right? Which is absolutely not true. You do not need one. But I didn't know any better. And so I was very fortunate and found a fantastic program at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana. And I got my master's degree in mining there. And that started my journey about 7.5 years ago.
That's amazing. And did you always know that you wanted to be an engineer when you were younger?
I did not. From the time I was a kid, I never pictured myself as an engineer up until I was 17 years old. I always wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I completely pivoted, and I'm here now. So it's okay that your plans and your path changes. And if you don't think of yourself as an engineer when you're younger, it's okay, because I definitely didn't.
Yeah, and I think your story is a great example of just keep redesigning your path, because you never know what's going to change.
It's your own. You can make it whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. So could you please share your involvement with SME and why it's important to you?
Yeah. So I got involved in SME when I was a student member in grad school. And I am so thankful to be a member of SME. I think, being a part of an industry organization is so crucial for young professionals and mid-level and senior professionals, because you get the opportunity to connect and engage with folks who have been at this for a while. It provided me an avenue to get involved and collaborate with folks who are, CEOs and managers, chief engineers, really high level, super skilled individuals who I wouldn't know otherwise. And I'm so fortunate to be able to call them my colleagues and collaborate with them through this organization. It also allows for global connection. I sit on the executive board for the Young Leaders Committee within SME, and we have members, and I have friends who I never would have met who are from India and China and Colombia and Canada and all across the world that I would never have had the opportunity to meet them and call them my friends and work with them without SME. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, actually, for me, when I was in Society of Women Engineers, I was also able to find a diverse community like that. So thank you for sharing about that. And along with your SME membership, I understand that you're also Vice President of Women in Mining in Utah, which is really cool. So what does your responsibilities include in that position?
Yeah, so a little bit about WIM, Women in Mining. It is just another type of professional organization, just like SME. And WIM's goal is to be the organization of choice for diversity and inclusion within the mining industry. Our Utah chapter we founded during the pandemic back in June of 2020. So we're still fairly new compared to the overall organization. But I'm responsible for helping support our individual committees within our organization. Our primary focus in Utah is actually education and outreach. So connecting with students, connecting with teachers, connecting with university students to make sure they know what opportunities are out there for them in mining and how the mining industry helps support everything else that's going on in the valley. And so I do that. And then I also run our social media pages too. So our LinkedIn and our Instagram and Facebook.
That sounds amazing. And so engineering, you're constantly solving problems, you're working together, and sometimes you have to multitask. So I was just wondering, what do you think is the most important skill or mindset that is required to succeed in an engineering career?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important things, we touched on communication earlier. That's definitely important. And I think part of that communication is also being able to take a step back and realizing that you have the opportunity and ability to learn from anyone that you're collaborating with. Being able to be patient and communicating are really, really important skills to consulting specifically, which is what I do now. And I think it's sometimes as younger engineers are coming in, they're super eager to prove that they can solve the problems, which a lot of the times they can, but being able to take that step back and realize that, you have a team that's supporting you and being able to listen to all of the input from those team members, I think is really valuable because the way we build teams, we want a diverse group. We want different inputs and connections, and just making sure that we take the time to hear all of those to provide a creative solution for what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's so important to just have an open mind and constantly keep learning. So we actually have another audience question, and Megan would like to know, if you and your team disagree on a decision, how do you figure out what to do and move together as a team?
That's a great question. I think sometimes disagreements come up a lot. Well, not a lot. It depends on the project. But I think what's really important to remember, again, is taking that step back, taking a pause, and communicating. So I said I liked lists earlier. I am a big fan of a pro and con list. So if we have a disagreement, what are the solutions that we have? Say we go down path A. What are the, high levels of success or potential concerns that come out of path A? And then down path B, what are the methods of success and potential concerns from that path? And sometimes it's just making sure that all of those opinions and concerns are heard. And then you can come up with a brand new solution and you create path C and you go down that route and it ends up being even better than the first two in your disagreement. So I think it goes back to the two things I just touched on, being able to be patient and being able to communicate as you're working through.
And in thinking about the students joining us today and in the future, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Absolutely. So I would say do not give up. I had said it earlier, when I was younger, I never pictured myself as an engineer. I never thought I would be sitting where I am today. I wasn't good at math until I was in college. I knew I wanted to do science, but we talked about challenges earlier too, but sometimes when you face a challenge, you just realize that it's experience that's just, geotechnical pun intended, strengthening your foundation for you to build off of for your own career, your own path, your own desire to achieve what you want to achieve. So don't give up.
Yeah, and now I know we talked a lot about collaborating, working with others, and so I was just wondering, what other types of engineers do you work with?
Yeah, so I think not only engineers, so I work in consulting now, but I did start my career off in the open pit mines. So when I worked in the mines, I worked with a number of different types of operators, and the mining industry cannot function without their operators. So truck drivers, equipment operators, assay lab technicians, mechanics, electricians, explosives technicians, all of these folks are so vital to our industry. And it's really important to make sure that we value what they do just as much as the engineers. So on the consulting side and also in the mining industry, I work with tons of different types of engineers and scientists. So like mechanical, electrical, civil, geotechnical, mining, process, structural, environmental. I work with geologists and chemists and hydrologists, air quality scientists, permitting specialists, all different types of people. And all of them are so talented at their jobs and what they do.
It's great how you're able to work with so many engineers. That's so many other individuals with different skill sets. So actually, what does a typical day in work look like?
Yeah, so my days look different depending on if I'm doing field work or if I'm primarily in the office. If I'm in the field, I would be logging core or the samples that are coming out from the drill rig that I'm working with. I'm performing site inspections like a dam safety inspection or a high wall inspection, or I'm helping with instrumentation installs or calibrating different types of equipment after they've been installed. But then when I'm in the office, I'm performing slope stability models. I'm helping write reports. I'm collaborating with my project teams. On the project management side, I'm checking invoices and making sure that I'm talking with clients to schedule the field visits that need to get taken care of if they need to happen. So that's very dynamic. It just depends.
Yeah, and we actually have another audience question from Ezra. And so what positive impact does engineering have on the world today? And this was actually similar to another question that I had for you, where I was going to ask, in what ways do you think your job encourages you to be a change maker?
I think that's a great question. So Ezra, thank you for asking, since it aligns so well with Kavya's question. I think that my role now that I hold has an impact because, sometimes I think the mining industry, it doesn't have the best public perception. And sometimes I think people might think it gets a bad rap, but honestly, the mining industry is responsible for all other industries in the world. Without mining, we wouldn't have the critical minerals that we need for solar panels or medical equipment or cars, bikes, roads, houses, buildings, any of our electronics. I couldn't be a floating head in your classroom without the critical minerals that helped make the technology that we're using right now. Our industry has done a really great job, especially the last 10 years, taking a look at ESG, which stands for environmental social governance, and making sure that we're addressing these issues and we're putting our best foot forward to make sure we're minimizing environmental impacts. We're properly reclaiming the land that's being used. And we're interacting responsibly with the communities or indigenous communities where these mine sites exist. So I think it's so important that, we make sure that everybody knows that without mining, our modern world doesn't exist. There's only two things now that exist that don't have a direct influence from mining, and that's sunlight. And if we're standing outside and we're breathing outside, the breath that we breathe outside are the two things we don't are not influenced from mining nowadays.
Yes, and actually this leads into our next question. So you have a very incredible career, and some kids, well, if they're not really sure about engineering, or if they think that they're not cut out for engineering, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So like I said, I never thought of myself as an engineer before, but I would say that, it doesn't matter what you look like or how you dress or your gender identity, or, if you fall under the neurodivergent umbrella like myself. If you have a goal of being an engineer, you should absolutely pursue it. We can have any different kind of colored hair that we want. We can wear wacky outfits. We can have tattoos, and, our physical appearance has absolutely nothing to do with our brain power as engineers. And it's okay to want to have like a serious job like an engineer. But it's important to remember too, like us as individuals and people, we're more than just one thing. We can be multifaceted. And I think that it applies to any profession really. But that's the one thing I would say, is that, the things that you like as a person don't affect your ability at all to be an engineer.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, because in the engineering field, there's like a space for everyone. So no matter your
absolutely
background, your interests, there's always a space for you to do something in engineering. Okay, so what do you do when you're not at work? This is a fun question, actually. What are your hobbies and interests?
It's my two favorite hobbies that I have. They're kind of polar opposites of each other too. But I like to crochet a lot. So I make like crocheted stuffed animals or blankets and things like that. And then I also train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing that for the last 5.5 years. COVID kind of had an impact on that, but those are the two things I really like to do.
And now that you mentioned COVID, I'm actually a little curious. How did COVID impact your work? Did you have to shift everything remotely, and did that affect the projects that you got to work on?
Sometimes a little bit, yeah. I think the biggest impact that all of industry saw from the pandemic was a delay in supply chain. So materials getting produced, because folks couldn't be in the factories for as many hours, couldn't have as many individuals working as standard. So we saw large impacts in supply chain that delayed projects. But my work personally, I did have to shift to being remote for a while, but I'm back in the office now, and every single day I have a hard time focusing at home. So I really like to be in an office environment and have like a structure around me for that. But so we saw some significant impacts, but we're still chugging along. So.
Great. And finally, what is something that you've done in your life that you're really proud of?
I am really proud that I earned my 2 degrees. Again, some things for me, especially because I wasn't really good at math until I hit college, I had to work a little bit harder than some of my peers to make sure that I actually understood what I was writing down in class. But I'm really proud that I made it through and I did it. Because again, if you had told me 10 years ago that I would have a master's degree in engineering, I probably would have laughed in someone's face. So I just never thought of it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing. It was so great to hear your story. And I think that now we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to introduce our hands-on challenge. So let's watch this Discover Engineering Challenge video featuring Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Rose, and I am a mining geotechnical engineer and a member of the Society of Mining, Metallurgy and Exploration, also known as SME. And today I have a great engineering challenge for you. We're going to build a simple machine that can help move material up and down. In my work, we use head frames to hoist machinery, materials, and people into and out of mines all across the world. So your challenge is going to design a well wench that hauls buckets up and down without spilling any of the contents inside. You can find the written instructions for this activity at discovery.org. So before I tell you about the materials you use, let's talk about how this well wench works. There are 4 main parts that help the bucket move up and down. The posts, which hold the winch up off of the surface, the rope that attaches to the bucket, the drum that helps the rope and the string wind around, and the crank, which you'll use to turn the drum. Here are the materials that you'll use for this challenge. A paper cup for your bucket, materials to make the posts or hold up your winch like cardboard tubes, such as a paper towel roll or boxes, string or thin ribbon for hauling the bucket up and down, an empty spool from ribbon or thread for the drum. If you're using paper towel rolls, you can also cut a piece of your paper towel roll off to use for your spool, some straws, pencils, pens, skewers for the crank, tape and scissors, and then some light materials to put into the cup like paper clips, beads, cotton balls, whatever you have lying around. And then you'll want to choose a ledge to raise and lower your bucket, like a desk or a table or a countertop. And as you start brainstorming designs, look at the materials that you've gathered and think about how they connect with each other. How can you attach that string to the drum so that it winds around and then unwinds without tangling at all? How does your crank attach to the drum and how will that spin around? What's the best way to attach the bucket to the strings so the contents don't fall out? When you're done building, use the tape to secure it to the ledge. And when it's time to test, lower your bucket and fill it with the materials that you've collected. Now raise the bucket as high as it can go. So, how did your winch work? Did you encounter any problems like your stuff spilling out of the cup, or maybe the drum didn't turn as smoothly, or even your crank could fall off? Don't worry about any of those things. Engineers rarely get it right on the first try when we're in the model design phase. Making improvements and trying your winch out again is part of the design process. Again, you can find these written instructions for the activity and so many more great activities at discovery.org. And most importantly, please have so much fun with this challenge.
All right, so I hope that you all will try the Wench Challenge and share your results with us. And remember, all the written instructions are on discovery.org. And so that wraps up our episode for today. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. It was great to hear about your story, your experience, and your inspiring advice. And I'm sure that everybody took away something from today's session.
Thank you again so much, Kavya, for having me, and Discovery for having myself and SME for the kickoff of season 4.
Thank you. And I definitely learned a lot. So we really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Please do join us for our next episode of Chats with Changemakers on Thursday, November 3rd, where we will meet our next guest, which is a project manager with an exciting career in STEM. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.